Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Consulting with Authority. This is Scott Cantrell. Excited to be joined today by the Director of Consulting for Barrett Values Centre. Barrett Values Centre has been providing cultural leadership and analytics tools and services since 1997. They are a global firm, and I know that Tom Rausch today, my special guest, will have a whole lot of insight that you want to be sure to note. So be sure you have a pen and paper ready to go. Mine is right here next to me, as always. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Sure. Well, we've talked a couple of times before, and it became clear from our first conversation that what you all are doing at BVC, Barrett Values Centre, is pretty unique in a lot of ways, but also very progressive and thoughtful from a consulting standpoint. Your career as well, from the conversation that we had before, is quite impressive. Maybe take a second just to let everybody know a little bit about your background and sort of the origin for Barrett Values Centre as well, and how you have found your way there.
Okay, that's a great place to start. I guess the place to start would be I did a master's program in adult education and started out in corporate training and development. And always loved that work when I was very young, but realized that to have the kind of influence I wanted to, I had to get out into the business world. So I went out into a sales career after running a sales training organization for automatic data processing. And that led me actually to found my own business. My wife had wanted to start developing kids CD-ROMs. We saw a place in the marketplace. And so we founded our own tech company back in 1995, which was an excellent time to get into tech.
I would say that's a good time to jump on the wave, Tom.
Yeah, and we landed a contract with Panasonic Interactive Media, and then we morphed that company into an internet company, rode that wave. A lot of our clients were brick and mortar. We stayed in the children's area. Highlights for Children here locally in Columbus, Ohio, where we live, was a client. We really built that up and had a great career, had fun running it. But by 2008, we were getting a little burned out. Had been, running a business for 13 years, and advertising agency came along and said, we really need a interactive group like you in-house. So we sold that business. And after the transition, that allowed me to reconnect. I was about 50 at the time, and allowed me to reconnect with what's really important in my life. And my love been teaching, development, training, helping leaders. And now at that time, I had the gray hair to be able to step in and the gravitas and some experience as a business, in business and with corporations, to be able to step into that role. So in 2008, I formed Leadership Beyond Limits with a partner here locally, and that got into leadership development and culture development, which is how I did it. I knew I needed to upgrade my tool set at the time. That was 2008, 2009. And the consulting industry had dramatically changed about then. Appreciative inquiry, which a lot of consultants listening to this might know, which is a constructive dialogue and way to bring whole system change, had really started to become popular about 10 years before that. I went up and studied that at Case Western up in Cleveland. The Barrett tools, we needed whole system change for culture, and Barrett was one of the few tools out there at that time around culture. And I looked at what was available in the marketplace and said, this is amazing, because Barrett looks at what's underneath what you can't see, kind of what's underground,
right?
The values, the beliefs, the meta needs, and understands that as humans and human systems, which we deal with primarily businesses, as human systems, we're all reacting to our basic needs, and that's what we value as our behavior. So fell in love with the Barrett tools and built up a practice around leadership development and culture change. Got really lucky and lucked into landing a large corporate client who asked me back in 2010, can you do all of this work remotely? We're spread out across 8 different parts of the globe, and our leadership team only gets together once every 3 years. So if you want us doing trust falls together at a conference room, that isn't going to happen except once every 3 years. So that forced me to do things remotely. So, which of course, fast forward to now, it really prepared me well for global work done virtually, and hopefully deep transformational work with leaders and culture, shifting businesses to their next level of success. And then last March, Barrett, who I'd been using their tools and selling their assessments since 2009, called me up and asked me if I'd come in and open up this new part of the business to really start serving the largest clients, the global movers and shakers who, quite frankly, if businesses don't get on board with the changes and transformation that needs to happen, humanity doesn't have a very good chance. And if business does get on board, I have no doubt that we will overcome the crises we face right now. So that's what I'm committing this last chapter of my consulting career to.
That is phenomenal. And it as with so many wonderful folks that I've had the opportunity to speak to, the thing that I always find interesting is everybody's path is different. I guess that's true. That's ubiquitous. That's probably a tautological statement. But the reality is, with consultants in particular, you might think, oh, well, this happens, and then I get into this, and I get into this, and I become a consultant. And there would be some kind of, consistent path in that sense. And it's just not the case. And I think that's one of the things that makes our industry so rich and vibrant, both with opportunity, but also in terms of being able to collaborate and work together, because we all have different experiences and different areas of expertise because of our varied backgrounds. And the story that you just shared about your progression and coming now to Barrett, where you've already been engaged with the methodology and using the tools over a number of years, and now you're in a position of leadership there where you can affect as significant, meaningful change through that company as possible. You kind of set this up, and I'd love for you to kind of describe it at a high level, not with necessarily any detail, but in terms of this shift that Barrett is doing and the work that you guys are trying to share on a global level, this role that you have in director of consulting and the work that you all are trying to put out there, this pivot that you all are making, maybe describe that in an overview way, because I think it's really, really important, Tom. And I think it's really, really compelling. And I share, we've had this conversation, but I share that philosophy and resonate with it very much. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about it, where you guys are headed.
Right. And I agree with what you said. To getting here it's funny because it's always a surprise and it's almost never as you planned, right? But significant things happen, and if you're paying attention and you ride what emerges, that's when great things happen. But so Barrett originally started in 1997 with the visionary Richard Barrett, who really had a vision to transform the way business does business. So all along, that's been the purpose and the founding purpose.
Sure.
But I think your consultants will appreciate an integral approach to whole system change, whether it's business or government or whatever. If you look at it from an integral 4 quadrants point of view, there's a personal leadership journey change, right, of aligning that. And then there's a values alignment, which is both your personal alignment and your collective alignment around culture. But then there's also a purpose alignment for the business. What is the mission and what is the purpose of the organization? And then there's an important structural alignment. And I'm guessing people listening to this call probably operate in one or two of those areas. Like
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, safe assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. So Six Sigma people are going to be going after making change through structural changes.
Right.
And folks like me, leadership and culture, are going to be going after that kind of thing. Well, over the years at Barrett, we've realized that we started to put too much emphasis in our comfort zone being leadership development and culture development. And we love that corner of the quadrant,
right?
But
yeah.
that's insufficient, because time after time, and I'm sure the consultants listening to this will agree, you can do a great job with a leadership team, and then a new owner comes in, or the company gets sold, or something new happens up. This amazing, I can't tell you how many times I've seen amazing work happen and it all gets ripped out because all four aspects of structure and purpose and leadership and cultural alignment weren't being done together. So our renewed commitment and our pivot is to reclaim what we always had, but had kind of gotten back into our comfortable corner in our comfort zone. And now we're looking to really expand and bring on, not only activate more of our own network. We have a network of thousands of consultants who's been trained in the Barrett Values tools, and would love anybody who's interested to want to learn more about that. But we're also looking at partnering. We have some really strong partners, like folks who do work at Barry Waymiller, and who've got some amazing offerings there. So what I'm doing right now, and I've been doing for the last 4 months, is looking out at the landscape and saying, where can we bring in other consulting firms and other people in our network and people we know are great, and help put together the full package so that we can go to organizations and confident make this whole system transformation that has to happen. And why we say it has to happen is all business has to adopt a purpose beyond profit, and remember that we're all here to serve society. And the UN Sustainable Development Goals is a big North Star for us. We've come out with some new assessments to help assess how aligned are your culture and your leaders to those goals. But that's the problem we're trying to solve right now, is how do we activate business to really deliver on sustainable development? Some people call it regenerative business or the circular economy. So I hope we're not too late because things look pretty dire if you listen to the news.
Right.
But that's where that's our North Star, and we're putting everything we got into it.
Well, I think it's no question, it's a worthwhile mission and effort and objective. And I think the note that you just said, having a purpose beyond profit, I think is really important. We've seen in society, we've seen, businesses that, and there are good businesses, and then there are good examples of this and bad examples of this, but we've seen businesses that have had the sole purpose of profit. And, some would argue, well, that is the purpose of business, is profit. And this is where we're not talking about a structural issue. We are truly talking about a values and purpose issue, something more foundational than that. And at the end of the day, from a civilization standpoint and from a society standpoint, it only makes objective, logical sense for there to be a purpose greater than profit. Because if profit is the sole paramount purpose, then ultimately that is, to use the word, that is ultimately unsustainable. If that is the sole purpose, it can be an important factor. It has to be, because the business has to continue to operate, right? It has to have resources to do that. But if that's the only purpose, and we're only thinking in that short-term mindset, we're not thinking medium-term and long-term and much further out, then all of a sudden we realize, that model is completely unsustainable. Right. It has to shift, and it has to shift now, has to shift quickly in order for us to get that horizon that we want and can have. I think if we coalesce around such a mission. So philosophically, I'm completely on board, and really appreciate that way of thinking. And I think I will say, and I know you guys have seen this too, there are very bright signs that there are meaningful executives and leaders and individuals and movements and associations and so forth that understand that as valuable and meaningful and necessary as profit is, and there's no question it is, that cannot be the end all be all, because that model is simply unsustainable. If we want to have meaningful long-term impact and growth and effect, then we have to find something bigger than that. And there are plenty of things that are bigger than that. Right. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned your network of consultants, and I think this model is really, really interesting to think about. A consulting firm that started in 1997, Barrett's Values Centre, and now from its scope and its relationship with consultants all around the world, thousands of consultants sharing this methodology and the processes and utilizing the tools to have impact with their clients. At a high level, walk us through that evolution, because I suspect, for two reasons. Number one, I suspect there are listeners and viewers who would be very interested in collaborating with Barrett and becoming one of those consultants. And so sharing more about how that process works would be very valuable for them. And then secondarily, this model of having valuable, proven intellectual property and being able to disseminate it globally. One person can't do that. A small team can't do that. You really do have to create a movement, so to speak. And I'd be fascinated to know how the company went about doing that.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, right? Because it literally was started in the basement. I don't know whether it was Richard's basement or his garage, but it literally started out of a house.
Lot
and with like a spouse helping out, and then a son helping out, and I think like a lot of things evolve. But one of the things I love about Barrett is, they've always been really sensitive to like sensing into what is the smart way to grow this. And they did have to initially create the IP, and it's quite brilliant stuff that shows you how values drive culture and leadership behaviors. But and at first they were trying to train it all themselves. And then they're like, well, we can't train up enough people to do this. So they started training trainers, right? And then those trainers. So it like most good businesses, it organically evolved, oddly, into kind of a cooperative system, So it's not a co-op, but it's not legally a co-op.
Right.
It was always designed like, if we can make our consultants successful, if we can provide unique tools that are maybe a little different than what's out there in the marketplace, and bring a lot of value, that's what those consultants are going to be successful, and they're going to get additional business. So that's where we're evolving to now, is not only taking our relationship with our current consultants, but other consultants we're bringing in, and helping them help us in a very co-creative way figure out, how do we bring whole system transformation, all sides of that quadrant, not just our values and leadership stuff, but the other stuff we need. How do we co-create that? And then how do we engage with the big companies, well, big and small companies really, in a journey, and say, this is a 3 to 5 year process to really move to the complete next level of transformation you want to get there. And guess what? It's probably going to be another 3 to 5 year process to the next level after that, because it's a continuous upward cycle. Sure. But think about yourself as a consultant, and I know myself as a consultant. It was like, oh, big contract, work, plenty of food on the table, contract's over. What do I do now? Right?
Exactly,
I'm back out selling. So part of this is the sustainability of our consultants is. And truthfully, anybody who knows what it takes to move a large organization, be it 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000, 100,000, and we're working with some organizations that, 500,000 people.
Yeah.
You don't move that overnight.
No. Right.
Right. So why not enter into alliances and agreements that say, let's partner for 3 to 5 years.
Right.
And work with your leadership team over that time, and measure your culture every 18 months, and work with your internal staff on all of the personal and leadership development that needs to be done. So that's part of how we're trying to continue to evolve. What we've been doing is to give people the story that will help people engage in that story. Because bottom line, culture is probably the hardest thing to copy. So in essence, it is probably your best competitive advantage because it's the hardest to copy.
Yeah.
And then when you understand the money to be made in doing business the new way, like one of the things I'm really excited about is like one of my long-term clients actually co-wrote a book called The Circular Economy Handbook.
Okay.
Which they identified $4.5 trillion worth of low-hanging fruit savings.
Wow.
just to be made by squeezing the waste out of the system.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So it makes good business sense to do it that way, right?
Yeah.
So, but a lot of people don't know that happy part of the story. Like a lot of people don't know that because of the disruption that's going on in the economy, and because of artificial intelligence, and the fact that solar and wind have become cheaper than gas, and oil. Luckily, of what we've been able to achieve is actually making it possible for the first time. We believe it's the dawn of a new age where every being on the planet could have food, water, shelter, good education.
Yeah.
Basically the American dream. The data, the people who look at the data say that living that kind of good lifestyle for everybody on the planet, even with 8 billion of us, and it could be supported up to 20 billion.
Wow.
For the equivalent of a couple $100 USD a month. So, but
it's amazing.
So the scientists and the people, technologists who understand all this stuff way better than I do, say that it's not really. Obviously, we have challenges to get on top of the problems that we're seeing right now quickly. But the real challenge that the people who know this stuff say is we switch the mindsets of the people at the top who might want to cling to the old way of doing it.
Yeah.
Rather than embrace the new story. The truth is that the new story is out there for us. It's within reach. And part of it is we got to tell that story, because a lot of people don't know that and have kind of given up.
Yeah.
And have kind of said, who am I? What can I do? Will any of it make a difference in the long run? And the truth is yes. And
yes, it will.
And we must act now.
Yeah. I think that's phenomenal. And thank you for framing it in that way, specifically talking about the network of consultants and the role that each one of those individuals plays, right? And how meaningful that is. I will tell you, just from echo what you just said, sometimes when I'm working with an organization, even if it's an incredibly successful project, which fortunately most of them are, but you look at the effect that you're having, and it's meaningful for that individual or for that organization, and you want to have a bigger, broader impact. But the question is, how do you make that happen? The reality is every impact that's positive is a step in the right direction. I think what you guys are properly framing is, if we're thinking more holistically in these 4 quadrants, for instance, and we're not siloing and just looking at one of them, but we're looking holistically at all 4 simultaneously. Maybe one takes a priority here or there, but we've got to raise all ships at the same time in order to get this result that we want to achieve. And the resources are available for us to do that. The technology is there, the knowledge is there, the expertise is there. It's all available. We just have to bring it to bear. And the only way we can bring it to bear is when that decision maker, that executive, or that leader's mindset is focused in that way. The realization that I heard you allude to, or basically just say, is when profit is no longer the top level objective, we can get more of it.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's the counterintuitive. That's the counterintuitive realization is, if we want to be more profitable, then we don't make it the king. And we can suddenly do more good and do better at the same time from a financial standpoint.
Right. Well, when you think about life, life always finds a way, right? Life always finds a way, and life looks at everything holistically. So the problem with our old linear viewpoint of business, our old take, make, waste point of way of doing business, is we didn't admit the environmental impact and didn't account for like what we took out of the earth, or what we took out of the air, or what we put back in the air. And we didn't measure the other side of it. We didn't measure the environmental side of it, and we didn't measure the societal side of it. Right. And we have to measure. And in fact, some people are just calling it completing capitalism, right? So finance, profit, we measure the heck out of that.
Yeah.
You know, we have whole areas of expertise on that. But how do we measure our impact on society, which is really critical, and that's what really makes it sustainable, and that's where the new profit comes from, because
that's right.
That's support. And on the planet side, treating the environment as what it is, a precious resource that can't be wasted. I mean, there's maybe 40 more years of topsoil left, and you know, we've really come close to the edge there. Now, luckily, you read some of the new science stuff. Like, I would encourage people to go to rethinkx.com, who's got some really smart guys, and they talk about the 10x disruption. But they in there point out how agriculture, believe it or not, we're to the point where we're going to be making our food out of ones and zeros. You know, we're going to be able to take some cells from the best Kobe beef, and we can have all the Kobe beef we want to eat and not have to grow cows to do it. Now that freaks a lot of people out.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
But the truth is our science can save us.
Yeah.
Can solve all of these things that people look at and go, these are unsolvable problems. They're not unsolvable. It's, do we have the mindset shift to make it happen? Which relates to your business, which I love so much, is why we originally started talking together, is what is that narrative and what is the story? Because in the end, this is just all stories that we tell ourselves.
100%. Absolutely. And with this idea of a mental narrative, or a mental, and I say mental, but it doesn't have to be just mental, it can be emotional. In fact, largely is an emotionally driven mindset, as opposed to just a mental construct that we've created. The emotionally driven construct of a story that we tell ourselves, or a narrative, a belief system that we have, we then wrap that in all of the data points that support that emotional point of view. Right. And all of a sudden it congeals and it becomes hard and concrete, and something that's very difficult for us to start to dissect and pull apart and shift. And so, not to be too abstract there, but I think that's a really important point. And this idea of a mental narrative, obviously from being a marketing person and a brand positioning person in terms of what I do, I think about it through that filter. But if we just think about a given human being and their belief system or their values that they have, being emotionally driven from all the different experiences and inputs they've had over their time, and then the data points that they get externally, or that they create, or that they filter through their own set of filters, it becomes this mindset, right? In the very truest sense of the word, that mind is set on a particular set of beliefs and values, and to start to pull that away or alter that requires a very a heavy lift. It requires a meaningful shift. And the good and bad and maybe ugly about that is that the world right now is having a very meaningful shift. And it doesn't matter, I'm speaking very apolitically here, right? It doesn't matter what what your political agenda is. The reality is, I think one thing we can agree is there's significant chaos in the world, and we prefer there not be. Now, how we go about solving those problems, we can debate, but I will say at the core of it, and this is true for me to an extent, just like it's true for anyone to an extent, we have to be willing to shift our thinking. We have to be willing to evolve around our mindsets that are, frankly, far too traditional and antiquated. And we have to be willing to embrace, yes, the science, yes, the technology, but frankly, just a new way of thinking. And if we're unable to make that shift, then, it doesn't look too promising. Here is the fortunate thing, and it goes back to exactly what you said, right? This classic line from Jurassic Park, which is life always finds a way. The human condition is quite resilient and quite robust. And if there's anything that we have successfully been able to do over the millennia, it is evolve and adapt. And sometimes that's a very difficult shift to make, and it costs us a lot to make that shift. And I won't ever say that it's easy, but it is something that we have proven ourselves to be capable and competent and able and willing to do over, hundreds and thousands of years. So there's no reason why we can't or won't do it this time. It's just, what is it going to cost? And who are going to be the leaders to help make that shift happen? And and to your point, the point you just made, which is, what does that narrative or story look like? And I think the answer is, I think part of the answer is we have to certainly make sure people understand the consequence of continuing along the path, the pain and consequence and true results of what happens if the status quo continues. Because really what we're talking about is transforming or removing the status quo, right? Destroying the status quo and moving into a new level of success or achievement or whatever we want to call it. And so there has to be this conversation around consequence. At the same time, I think from a marketing standpoint, maybe even a human condition standpoint, we focus way too much on consequence and pain. Now, it's from a marketing standpoint, it's understandable why we do that. Here's the marketing lesson for the day that everyone already knows. And that is that people respond and they change their behavior more when they're threatened with pain or negative consequence than when they're moving toward pleasure. But I think we have to aspire to be better. I think we have to show not a utopia, but we have to show what the world can be, and get people to aspire to something better. And that's when, in my opinion, that's when humans and society is at its strongest. It's not when we're running away from fear or running away from something we're scared of or pain. It's when we're aspiring to be something greater. That's right. And that's when we can make these big leaps that you're talking about. And that's the nature, I believe, of what Barrett is doing. Again, just to go back to this philosophical structure around these 4 quadrants, yes, we have to be aware of the consequence. And yes, there's pain if we don't change. But what we're really talking about is this aspiration of what could be. Right. And do you want to be part of that or not?
Yeah. And telling that positive story. I mean, my eyes, again, really opened when I read the rethinkx.com stuff on rethinking humanity. Is like, oh, wow, this really is possible. And everything fell into place for me. And then, of course, Barrett calls up and offers me this opportunity to step into this bigger role.
Right.
And the other thing that's 2 points of listening to you is life always finds a way, and life will always bring you crisis if you're not paying attention. If you're too concretized in bad habits and and thinking that no longer serves you, which is what's going on and which is why people are waking up. But you also talked about, human beings, and in the end, business is a human enterprise. It's made up of human beings. Business is really nothing more than human beings talking and agreeing to do things together. I mean, it's a human enterprise, and human beings are physical. We're our bodies. We need our basic needs met. We need air, water, food. We are mental, right? We need mental stimulation and all of this great stuff, all of that these really smart people are inventing to help save our planet is a lot done from our logical point of view.
Sure.
But we're also emotional, right? And that's where the storytellers in our life can call us to that next level of meaning. And lastly, I would say, we're spiritual, whatever word you want to use there. we're all called to higher meaning. And this goes all the way back. Barrett's model aligns all the way back based on Maslow's hierarchy of human needs.
Right.
But it dates back to Socrates and Plato and what they called eudaimonia, which is man's search for meaning. I mean, Viktor Frankl talked about it in that great book about man's search for meaning. And anybody who gets to be 40, 50 years old starts to realize, why am I doing this work? And it's like, that's the purpose beyond profit.
Right.
Am I, do I need one more boat, or or even if you're not there, if you're just struggling to feed your family, it's like, I want work that has meaning to
fulfillment.
So,
right. Yep.
So we're doing some work along there at Barrett too. We're coming out with a new employee well-being assessment that we think goes a step beyond engagement, which was about helping people put their strengths to work, which is really, really important. But beyond that, we want fulfillment. We want people to feel excited to get up, and I'm excited when I get up and go to work every morning. And everybody should have that opportunity. And it doesn't have to be in a glamorous job. I've seen janitors excited to go to work because they had the right mindset and appreciation for life. So that the whole idea of treating systems, people and systems. I mean, business has been created as a legal person. We're physical, real people, but business has been created as a legal person, and we need to treat it as this physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual entity, because that's what it is.
Because that's what it is, because it's made up of beings that are all those things. Yeah,
exactly.
Right. And that's a fantastic metaphor. And I think that is a great part of the story that has to be told, is that business is, again, to use the cliche, but I think it's appropriate, is a living, breathing organism, not just an organization, but an actual organism. And the reason that's true is because the cells of that organism are people. And so if a given organization wants to hit its peak performance and aspire to something greater, at the same time, avoid all the pitfalls and consequences and pain that would otherwise come, then we, just like our own bodies, our own physical bodies, or our own experiences as humans, if we only focus on the physical and we ignore the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, we're going to struggle. If we ignore the emotional and only focus on the others, we're going to struggle. It is a coalesced piece, and we have to think about these things holistically. One individual, one given consultant doesn't have to be an expert on all areas. That's why all of us exist, is because we all have different areas of expertise. And that's the thing I love about what you're doing at Barrett, is you're bringing these people together, and you're bringing these tool sets together that allow for a holistic treatment of an organization, to help them move beyond what they have been to become something greater for the organization itself, but greater for the players within that organization.
Yeah.
So let's back up one step here. And then I want to go one more place before we have to wrap up our conversation. But this has been really, really insightful and eye-opening already, and a little different than our normal interviews, but I think it's really, really important for this type of conversation to be had, especially in our world of consulting, because consultants, we are the change makers. Or at the very least, we are the change stimulators. Right. It's our clients that make the change, but we help stimulate and guide and direct and navigate them. And so it's really, really an important role, and not just a role, but a true responsibility we have to make sure we're leading individuals and organizations in the right direction. Describe for me the nature of the network of Barrett. How are those relationships created? Maybe going a little bit tactically here. You don't have to get into the details and the weeds, Tom, but how does that relationship happen? Does someone come to Barrett and say, I'm interested in utilizing your tools, and there's a licensing arrangement? Do they have to go through an application process? What does that tether and that connection look like between Barrett and a given consultant?
Yeah. So, and I'll only speak to what we've done traditionally. Things are going to be changing a little bit as we move forward, and we're trying to figure out more ways to open more things up. But our traditional way of people working with us is to come get certified in the use of our tools, because it's basically like 40 hours of instruction to really understand how to use these assessments. And culture diagnostics, analytics, and then transformation is a complex animal. It's not it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's much more complex than that. So we do require a certification license in that, and typically, but people are coming from all over. I mean, we have life coaches come who just want to take on our leadership thing because our leadership values tools go deeply. We have OD and HR people come because they want the culture piece of what we have, and we can help them make change that way. But like I said, I'm looking to expand even more. And some of our leaders are like specialized in finance. So we have people who are taking this stuff and using it in finance. And there's a whole movement in ethics and compliance to move away from rules-based compliance to values-based ethics. Wow. So you can pretty much name the function, the role, any type of consultant can come to us, I think, and find something valuable to use in the Barrett tools. And we hope to expand that even more. And like I say, we're looking for more and more partners to come in and help us make this holistic change that we want. But yeah, all they would need to do is we have a ton of information on our website at Barrett Values at valuescenter.com.
Okay.
It's Values Center spelled the European way because we are global and had a UK basis. But yeah, valuescenter.com, and you can learn all about our assessments and how you might get in touch with us. And anybody who's listening to this, if they want to reach out to me at tom@valuescenter.com, I'm happy to have some conversations with folks too. But that would be the best way to reach out and get involved.
But yeah, it's very gracious for you to offer your direct email. And I would encourage people to go to the website, valuescenter.com. Center is, as Tom mentioned, CENTRE.com, and check it out. There's also a wealth. You guys have a fantastic set of just available resources there that kind of paint the picture for how you guys think about what you do and your philosophies and on all different areas and topics. And so people can get a real good understanding for the flavor of the work that you do and how you do it just from those resources.
We have a free personal values assessment they can look for on there too, that something like 30,000 people a month download and use. So it's really valuable to use.
Yeah. And I've been through that as well. And it is quite insightful, very simple, but you don't have to answer a whole lot of complex questions to get meaningful insight. And that's what you guys have figured out and have done there. So it's really, really nice tool. As we come to the end here, a question I always like to end with is, and this can be personal, can be professional, can be a combination of both, Tom. And we've probably talked around some of these just in our conversation here, but top lessons learned over your career that maybe would be beneficial for our listeners and viewers to know if they haven't, thought about them before, or in the case of so many of us, we have to hear things 7, 8, 10, 12 times before they really coalesce and become part of that mindset we were talking about earlier. So lessons learned from your personal and professional life.
I think one thing that popped to mind when you were talking about how all our paths are different, everything that personally great happened to me and life transforming was totally unexpected. And I was just paying attention at the time. Sometimes I got slapped across the face to have to get that attention. But I would say that emergence, and for all of us consultants on the listening to this, is that paying attention to what wants to emerge. It's way less us creating it. I believe the older I get, the more I think life happens through us rather than by us. So I'm way less into trying to control and manufacture things happening, and I'm way more paying attention to what is wanting to emerge, because I think that's how we align with life. For me, purpose was the defining call. When I discovered my life's purpose, and I actually downloaded my mission as to make business an agent of world benefit, that changed everything in my life when I hit 50, and I realized, oh, that's what I'm on the planet to do. So that aligned me with Barrett. That aligned me with another purpose group that I'm aligned with. That aligned me with conscious capitalism, because guess how many people are out there with that shared mission to make business and age in a world benefit. And as a consultant, and whether you're a solopreneur in a small firm or whatever, we need to know who our tribe is.
Absolutely.
Right? And there's more and more of us out there. It could be storytellers wanting to, tell that new story. So getting clear on your North Star, and that's also when the world starts to unfold in front of you. It seems to me that the more aligned on purpose I am, the more things happen naturally for me.
Yeah.
And then I think our duty in like being the best consultant we can be, and showing up as the best human being we can be, and grandfather and parent and spouse, is, do you have daily practices? And I don't care whether it's meditation or prayer or exercise or eating healthy, taking care of yourself and having a conscious, and for me, a lot of it's around, how do I stay open to new perspectives? How do I avoid my biases? Because I'm stepping into this bigger role of trying to coalesce a whole bunch of really smart people. One of the things I love about my job is I know I'm never the smartest person in the room anymore because I'm gathering in. But how do I, stay open to those perspectives and not get stuck in my own concrete stories, right?
Sure.
So I personally am a huge believer in daily, I call it micro learning. It's like what every morning I'm setting some goals around how I'm going to show up, specific things I'm going to accomplish, bigger areas like, oh, I really want to get some feedback today on this aspect of how I lead. So I'm going to ask a few people. So I rediscovered that a few years back, and I swear I've been learning more in the last few years at age 60 than I was for much of my 40s and 50s when I thought I knew it all. Right? Yeah. And so having that humility and that daily practice, kind of, I got more to learn and I'm going to learn something today.
Right.
Just setting that intention makes a huge difference.
I think those are all fantastic. I wrote them all down. And they're certainly all things that I could do better at, and working to refine in my own life and my own career. So thank you for that. I know they'll serve everyone who's paying attention, Tom, to use your note. Listen, I can't say thank you enough for your time and your expertise and the vibrant conversation, not to mention just how much personal appreciation I have for what you all are doing at BVC from an objective and purpose and mission standpoint. I think it's, as I said at the very beginning of the interview, I'll reiterate it. I think it's really important work, and it's essential, necessary work. And so I will hope to continue to be an advocate and a disciple of what you guys are doing. And I would encourage everyone watching and listening to learn more about the objective and mission that Barrett is on. Maybe you can come alongside them and be a part of that. But either way, I think whether we know it or not, we're all on this mission together. And so the more intentional and strategic and structured we can be around achieving those goals, the better it is for everyone. So, Tom, again, thank you for your time and your expertise. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for listening. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor of our show, Smart Solutions Media. Smart Solutions Media empowers business owners, consultants, and other independent professionals to easily attract better prospects and transform them into long-term clients. If you're a B2B consultant or service professional and would like to start filling your pipeline with better quality prospects, Visit us on the web at smartsolutionsmedia.com to learn more about what we can do to help you. Be sure to complete the short 2-minute accelerated growth scorecard you can find on the website, and you'll receive a complimentary strategy session where we'll give you specific insights and recommendations to help you attract high-value clients. Until next time, make sure you are consulting with authority.